Hello and welcome to Alaska's Political Pipeline. I'm political reporter Will Courtney, sitting down alongside me, former state lawmaker Lesil McGuire, running for governor. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Will.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this race for governor. There's a lot of candidates running. 18 is the number that I counted. Tell me a little bit about why you want to be Alaska's next governor.
Yeah, well, we're at a crossroads in Alaska's history. I served for 16 years, started out as a very young woman, attacked the problems of the day, and stepped away into the private sector for the last 10 years. I wasn't initially going to run, and my heart called me. I feel that what we need right now in a governor is someone that has that experience, understanding the process, knowing how to work across party lines, knowing how to work with the legislature, knowing how to work with commissioners, and communities to make things happen. So for me, it was a call I just couldn't ignore. I wanted to give Alaskans a choice of a woman, lifelong Alaskan, who has led before and is ready to take on the challenge, beginning work on day one.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about that moment you decided that this is the time I want to enter the governor's race. You were one of the last candidates.
Yeah.
Remind me, you filed on the last day, I believe.
I did. I've always filed on June 1st. In all the 11 elections I won, I feel the process is set up and designed to allow those that want to enter, and then for you to be able to evaluate whether or not the field is complete, whether there's something missing, and the deadline's there for a reason. I actually made the decision May 28th of last year. That's when I began to hear the call. I started looking at the state and recognizing that we still have reliance on that one source of income, that our energy diversification still isn't complete from the work that I started in the legislature, that some of the Arctic policy that I wrote is only now bearing fruit, that our young people are leaving in droves in our out-migration, that our education system is falling apart. The school system that I was a beneficiary of, we were 1, 2, and 3 in the nation. We're now 47th. I started listening to Alaskans who were talking about public safety becoming a concern again. And as I waited out through the year, it's always tough because you've got to step away from your family. There's tremendous sacrifice that public servants made. I gave myself the deadline of June 1, and when that day came, I knew I needed to step up to serve.
Yeah, and you have a quote with the Anchorage Daily News of when you were filing that about Republicans. I have that quote here. You said, "I've been struggling with it for a year because I'm sick of the Republicans." Tell me a little bit about what you meant by that.
I meant, and I think it was taken a little bit out of context, what I meant is that I am sick of political rancor, Republicans and Democrats, and I'm hearing this from Alaskans. I guess I served in a unique time in Alaska's history. I was a mentee of Ted Stevens, Don Young, leaders that came before who worked on results as opposed to partisanship. And I have seen a distinct decline in civility. I have seen more rancor and partisan gridlock that I really believe is impacting Alaskans' ability to get things done. It's affecting our education system. It's affecting putting renewable energy systems into place. You're even seeing it now on the gas line. That's legislation that I wrote. I created the Alaska Gas Line Development Authority. It took me 3 years. And there are many tools and pieces there, and yet what I see over and over is a devolution by Republicans and Democrats. So one of the things that I hope that I can bring to this is leading the way I led. I put together some of the first bipartisan coalitions, and I get that there are criticisms on both sides, but uniquely, it is interesting to see Republicans tend to criticize that model, tend to criticize ranked choice voting and open primaries, when those are the kind of things that will move Alaska forward back to civility. Alaskans have always led together. The Alaska that I grew up in was an Alaska that didn't look at people by their party first, didn't look at them by the region of the state that they lived in or their gender or what wealth bracket they came into. Our families that came here and the families that have lived here for thousands of years in the indigenous space, They were always waking up, looking for what neighbors they could partner with to get their ideas into motion, to build those jobs. And I just think we've lost our way.
Tell me a little bit about losing our way, especially, I want to ask particularly, you're running as a Republican. There are several Republicans. Majority of people running for governor are Republicans, and a lot of different ideas from each. So tell me a little bit, what is the state of the Republican Party here in Alaska?
I think it is a state of moving too far away from the voters. That's the concern that I have, and part of the reason that I chaired and spearheaded the open primary system. Alaska had what you would call a blanket primary from territorial days all the way into the early 2000s. There was a Supreme Court opinion that allowed parties to close again. And what I experienced after having been elected a few times under the open primary system was a move to the far right and to the far left. And I started to see it while I was serving, and by 2016 when I left, in spite of the efforts to put a coalition together, I feel it was in full swing. So I feel that both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party now, under that time period where we had closed primary systems, began to build back up around a party system. And I don't think the party system represents Alaskans. We are a small state by population and a huge state by geography. The party system is a national organization. The planks and the movements around it are very national oriented, and they just don't fit very well when you think about Alaska. So I feel that those systems move away from real Alaskans' interests, and they don't serve us.
Yeah. What would you say your number one issue is?
My number one issue is affordability, and I want to start with energy. What I built when I was serving, I spearheaded the creation of the state's first energy policy. We didn't even have a policy that reflected renewable energy. The policy, I guess you would say, was oil and gas. And I still think Alaska has a future in oil and gas. We're seeing it now with the commercialization of the North Slope gas, and we're seeing a return in NPRA and other places where we'll build back the volume of that pipeline. But we need to diversify. And when you think about affordability, it isn't necessarily what we export out to meet the budget needs. It's Alaskan families and how they heat their homes and how they electrify. We have people in Fairbanks that are paying up to $4,000 a month. Here in Anchorage, what I know is we get worried every single winter. We have rolling brownouts. Those rolling brownouts were being threatened when I was serving. We put that policy into place. We got the renewable grant program working, the Supply Energy and Transmission Fund working, and we had weatherization of our homes. In the last 10 years since I left, all of that work has stopped. I don't know why, but we need to get back to it. That affordability is critical. When you think about Alaskans wanting to live and work and raise their families here, they're worried about what they're paying at the grocery store. They're worried about filling up their tanks of fuel. They're worried about the cost of energy in their own homes. And if we can't fix that, we will not attract and retain the best and brightest.
Yeah. I want to ask you a few questions about some of the top issues, but before I do that, as the executive, the head executive in Alaska, a partnership or some sort of communication with the head executive in the country is also key.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on President Trump, and if you are elected governor, you'll have another president afterwards for that. Tell me a little bit about how you plan to communicate with the President of the United States.
That's a great question, and a reminder that the governor is the CEO of the state. And I really ask voters watching these interviews to consider what the qualifications are for that and what people's experience and background. One of the things that I like about running with a 16-year track record is people can understand how I led and how I voted. What I'm known for is working with everyone, and I'm proud of that fact. Again, there will be people who are further to the right and further to the left who make a living out of dissension about working with individual presidents. I will work with President Trump for Alaskans' best interests. Yeah. And I will work with any president for Alaskans' best interests. I do not think getting into fights that are of a political nature benefit Alaska. So everything about my leadership is policy-centered, community-centered, and Alaskan-centered. It is not about politics for me.
Gotcha. Let's go into some of those top policy issues on the ballot this year. Cost of living is something that is key. You've mentioned affordability is one of your top issues. Tell me a little bit about, when we have an economy that's somewhat in jeopardy, when you've mentioned yourself, oil revenue has only been decreasing. We have this potentially transformational gas line, which could really boost employment here in the state, a whole bunch of different economic opportunities from it. Tell me a little bit about, as governor, how you plan to alleviate some of those burdens for Alaskans.
Yeah, one of the first things that I want to do is command my Commissioner of Revenue to assemble a team of mayors, local leaders, and economic experts to get a true assessment about the state of our economy. We have different placeholders and mile markers where we can understand we're at 440,000 barrels of oil today at about 104. We understand that Santos and others are bringing reserves in, and those numbers should grow 500, 600, 700,000 in the next 5 to 10 years. What does that mean? In the meantime, how soon can we get those jobs up and running for the gas line? How soon can we bring other industries? So I've been in conversations with micronuclear companies. There are data farm companies who are interested in coming here. And I want to begin a dialogue with Alaskans to ask them to consider, not to buy into the rhetoric about that, but to understand that a sound policy for communities that would like them located, that have an energy source, or perhaps would like a renewable energy source, might be able to engage in that. What kind of revenue can we bring in from that? What kind of revenue can we bring in from attracting new wind companies? What kind of revenue can we attract by bringing in state-of-the-art technology investment? There are people all over the world that think Alaska is one of the brightest, hottest spots on the planet, and I happen to agree with them. The Arctic is finally on the map. When I led the effort to write Alaska's Arctic policy, I had people that thought it was kind of curious that I would put my attention toward it in 2006. The Arctic was opening up for the first time, and I saw that potential. Right now is the time. We need to seize on that. It might be a combination of attracting in efforts around the Arctic port, technology associated with that, low Earth orbit. One of the things that I did in the private sector the last 10 years is bring the very first US licensed low Earth orbit project right here to Alaska, and it's above us in polar orbit. How can we leverage that ubiquitous connectivity to grow other sources of income? So it's about looking at the future 10, 20, and 30 years from now with a real keen eye toward what those numbers are going to look like. And then it's going to be a conversation about what we do with existing revenue sources and inviting Alaskans on a journey. We can do this together. We can do this.
Yeah. And the PFD is also something that Alaskans watch very closely every single year. Yeah. It has been declining. We're facing a $1,200, not facing, maybe it's the wrong word, but we're going to have a $1,200 PFD, $1,000, and then a $200 energy relief included in that. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on the PFD. We've seen governors or candidates for governor announce very different plans. Tell me your plan.
So my plan right now is to put into place a series of pieces that I have been doing throughout my career. New development, I would like to create a future economic development fund, and that's to include renewable energy projects as well. I put a piece into the Alaska Gas Line Development Authority that has not yet been implemented. I look forward to implementing, that allows Alaskans to benefit alongside the gas pipeline as well. So I do want to look at what are future economic growth funds, places where Alaskans can partner as we grow the future. One of my fears about continuing to focus on the permanent fund is it keeps us stuck in one place in time. And I don't think that's healthy for Alaskans. I do think Alaskans deserve a healthy dividend. If there is a way to grow that amount, I would like to. I'd like to pay the biggest dividend to Alaskans we can. I think it helps people in times like this where you have constraint. I think it's become a huge part of our economy. And quite frankly, it is a part of our Constitution. And it's a part of that wealth that we all share by the resources that are held in common. That being said, we have an education system and a constitutional commitment to that. We have roads that are falling apart. We have ports. There are all kinds of things that we have to consider as we move forward. So I'd like to allow a conversation to grow from a community-led group, something that I don't think has happened. I did it on the Arctic policy. I did it on Alaska's first energy policy. When you lead, it shouldn't just be top down. It's about bringing mayors and community leaders alongside you. I had 32 in the Arctic policy and another 24 in the energy policy, and they're transparent. So the public gets to participate, gets to hear the data coming alongside and weigh in. I would like to have more informed discussions. One of the things that does concern me about this gubernatorial field, and part of why I entered, is I'm hearing a lot of sound bites, a lot of platitudes. And what I worry about there is it puts Alaskans back in a place of fear. So they hear a candidate say, I'm for a full statutory PFD. And they want to believe that. So they lock into that and then start tuning out some of the other economic realities and opportunities that could come forward. So what you get with me is an open, intellectually curious, lifelong concerned Alaskan that wants all of us to jump in, roll up our sleeves, pull up our boots, and face our future with confidence and optimism, knowing that places all over the world have fewer resources than we do, have fewer good people than we do, and are going along just fine.
Yeah. Pivoting a little bit over to public safety, something you mentioned earlier as well. Public safety concerns have been rising here in the state. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on the state of public safety here in Alaska and how you aim to address some of those concerns.
Thank you. Alaskans deserve to feel safe in their homes and their communities, and they no longer feel safe. Right here in Anchorage, of course, you've been seeing the rise that we've had in violence and theft, in people's homes being broken into, and their very sense of well-being being threatened. When I was out visiting Ukqiavik this past weekend, I'm learning about more missing Indigenous women. I'm learning about more cases where investigation hasn't gone forward. What I would like to do on day one is commission my my commissioner of public safety to chart a real investigation and an uncovering of what's happening. Why are we not having the kind of training that we need in our VPSOs, our state troopers, and quite frankly, serving as a resource then for the local community police departments? I think that there's a training problem. I think there's a resource problem. How can we attract and retain more really qualified people to join the already qualified people in our state who I think are working in many cases on shoestring budgets? We have got to activate a real plan for addressing domestic violence, and we have to bring it up and out of the darkness into the light. If we're going to continue to be a state that wants to be the best and brightest and wants to attract investors in renewable energy, in gas, and more, I don't think that we can be that state if we continue to lead the nation in the highest rates of domestic violence and assault and murder of our women and our children. So at the first, I want to bring that up into the light. I started the first policy on sex trafficking. It was just an undercurrent at that moment in time. We need to build on that, go back into that, find out what resources are needed in the Department of Law to investigate and prosecute. We can partner with the federal government on this, and I think we need to be bold and ask for more resources and more ideas that come into this space, but we've got to take it on.
Switching gears again, over to something that we've been talking about this entire conversation, energy and resource development. Tell me a little bit about your policy proposals when it comes to energy and resource development. And I have some follow-ups to go a little bit in the weeds of this issue, but tell me just out the get-go, what are some policy proposals?
So I want to separate energy policy into domestic and exportation. So number one, we have got to focus on the domestic supply of energy because that directly relates to the affordability of the quality of life that people need here in Alaska. I think about the UAE, I think about Iceland, I think about the fact that they started to address these things. It took them 5 to 6 years. We started it when I was serving, and it didn't continue. We need to get right back to it with real mile markers. How are we going to reform the Regulatory Commission of Alaska and allow them to accept and welcome more sources of renewable energy into our feedstock? I championed Fire Island's wind farm. It's our first and only wind farm. I thought by now we'd have more. What are the barriers to attracting and retaining more geothermal, more wind, more solar, more small nuclear? There are places on the planet that now are putting forward a domestic, secure energy portfolio that meets the needs of their community members. We can do this. We could be the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy. We could end up exporting some of it. But first, let's start here at home. We need affordable, reliable, available sources of energy. Affordability speaks into competition and diversity and to the specific supply. Availability. We can't continue to rely on Cook Inlet supplies. I have worked on the Cook Inlet Revitalization Act, and I'm willing to continue to do that. And the pieces that come in with the gas line, let's continue. But there are other sources of energy in the renewable field that we can welcome into our grid and system. And then, of course, it is reliability. And those are really the key pieces. You have an entire group of people here in Alaska, and it's growing, of experts in these fields waiting to be unleashed. As far as our budget and our reliance on oil and gas, we are an oil and gas economy. We should continue to be that. Quite frankly, we supply hydrocarbon safer, more reliably, employing workers with fair standards than anywhere else on the planet. So we should continue to do it. The world will continue to depend on oil and gas. We should be the supplier of that. So I want to go back to some of the provisions that I put in that helped us get more wildcatting. There are different kinds of companies out there, and I feel for many decades, Alaska sort of relied on the big three majors and kind of stopped doing the critical thinking around how to develop the smaller stranded oil and gas plays. We've seen exciting new investment in Alaska. We need to go back to those pieces and figure out, how did we get Armstrong here? How have we got some of these other companies here? What made it attractive to them? Build on those features. Again, I'd like to put some incentives in for Alaskans to uniquely benefit and partner in that alignment alongside some of the new development. But I think it's about domestic encouragement of real sound policy to move these pieces into action. And then over here, it is about being proud that we are an oil and gas economy and recognizing that it is not diametrically opposed to a sound domestic renewable energy system. What can we build on to attract new entrants who are willing to take up plays that may be passed over by the big three, and then to continue working to fill up that pipeline? I think we're going to see those numbers go up, and to become the energy economy that I know that we can be. It should be the thing that we focus on more than any other thing. And quite frankly, it's what allows us to then go back to having a good education system, to having a good system of public safety. I feel that as that decline in our pipeline happened people just kind of fell asleep at the wheel. They stopped paying attention to what filled up the budget, what drove those quality of life features that made Alaskans want to live and work here. And then we stopped diversifying the economy, and we stopped paying attention to the really accessible renewable energy pieces that could be fueling and powering people's homes right now. There's no reason that people should be paying $4,000 a month to heat their home.
And when it comes to economic diversification, too, that's something that you mentioned not too long ago. In your response just there, you really emphasized the fact that the state has relied on oil revenue throughout the majority of its history. It's just been something that has really been transformational for this state, put the state on the map, and now the environment is different. The landscape is just different ultimately. So tell me a little bit about how you plan to diversify the economy. I know this is a whim of the legislature that's very interesting them. You've mentioned investment in renewable resources. Are there other elements of potentially diversifying the economy that you're interested in?
Yeah, I think there are. One of the unique things about the governor of Alaska, we have a lot of tools at our disposal. We have ADA, we have AEA, we have the Alaska Gasline Development Authority. We have tools at our disposal. I think it's about leadership more than anything else. A good governor will direct that cabinet of highly motivated individuals to go after the economies of tomorrow. I've named just a few: data farms, call centers, things situated around the artificial intelligent universe, drones, firefighting drones, intellectual property that is related directly to the growth of renewable energy. There are our aerospace industry. There are a myriad of exciting economic development opportunities that are waiting for us out there. People want to invest in Alaska. I meet with them all the time. They want to be a part of angel investment. They want to be a part of funds. I think it's about leadership, and the person who's the tip of the spear, who is leading the state for the state on behalf of the people, has to send that signal out that says, we're welcoming you. Come in, bring your ideas. Does that mean we're going to accept them all whole cloth? Absolutely not. I'm a hell of a negotiator. But let's at least welcome them. And then working with the legislature is a really critical piece. Because when I think about just data centers as one piece, if you had a governor that was relaying information about conversations with data farms to the legislature, perhaps you wouldn't see legislation that comes out wholesale sweeping with taxation and restrictions before anybody even understands what the economy is. We could decide that we only put data farms in Alaska with a stranded gas resource in a community that wants it, or in communities where there is a renewable energy resource where we'd like a volumetric underpinning. We could decide that there's a taxation that goes into a general pool that benefits other Alaskans. There are all kinds of ways of thinking about these things, but when you think about being in the year of 2026, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. And my last question for you, we're running a little bit close to time, but something I know you're particularly passionate about, ranked choice voting.
Yes.
It's going to be something that's on the ballot
Yes.
this year. Tell me about your thoughts on ranked choice voting.
I'm a huge proponent of open primaries and ranked choice voting. I help champion the effort to bring Alaska back to what we had from territorial days all the way through the mid-2000s, which is an open primary system that allows highly independent Alaskans to vote for the person they believe in. And that's the product of a lifelong Alaskan who grew up in a family where we voted for the person we believed in. It might be a Democrat, it might be a Republican, it might be a Libertarian. I think it is absolutely vital that Alaskans understand that the shift in this system back to what we used to have is one of the most empowering things that has happened for them in my lifetime. When you return to a closed primary system, what you are doing is transferring your authority to big business, to lobbyists, and to political parties that sit outside this state. And if we go back to that system, what you end up is people moving far to the right and far to the left. And the main of Alaskan, about 63% of Alaskans are nonpartisan, undeclared, independent folk. They might even have a political affiliation, but really when it comes down to it, most Alaskans want to vote for the person. And I think it is imperative that Alaskans understand when they hear the opposition, recognize, research where it's coming from and why. People are trying to take away your power. Don't let them.
And I was just going to say, former state lawmaker, thank you for your time. I
Don't
appreciate
let
it.
them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.